Well, yesterday it was Elvis, today it's Blur. I want to thank Dave Rowntree for what is not only a great speech, but inspiring and challenging, and I wish him well as the candidate for us. As I wish well Karen Buck, who's done a magnificent job as the Member of Parliament for this area. And you can see the difference in academies, you can see the difference in Sure Start centres, you can see the difference in the increased provision in this area, and a huge amount of that is due to the personal work of Karen Buck, and I applaud her for everything that she's doing. You know, as you know, it's one of the great myths perpetrated by the media that young people do not care about politics. But my experience is that young people care more about the world around them than any other group of people. And the world around you is what politics is about, which is why so many people support children in need, so many people support comic relief, so many people supported the Disaster for Haiti Fund, so many people, when they see pictures of destitution or deprivation and despair, people feel, no matter how distantly, the pain of others, and people feel that they believe in something bigger than themselves. And there's this story told, which sums it all up, about a meeting between Ronald Reagan, when he was President of the United States of America, and Olof Palme, who was the Swedish Social Democrat Prime Minister, unfortunately assassinated in the 1980s. And Olof Palme had gone across to talk to Ronald Reagan and to persuade him that more money should be spent on the environment and on international development. And when he arrived at the White House, Reagan turned to his advisors and said, "Isn't this man a communist?" And his advisors answered, "No, Mr. President, he's an anti-communist." And President Reagan said, "I don't care what kind of communist he is." But Olof Palme was then asked by President Reagan, what did he believe in? What were his views? What did he stand for? And he said, "I stand for fairness. I stand for everyone to have the chance to realize the potential to the full in every part of the world." And I believe that that is the great instinct of most decent people in our world. You know, the other myth about this election campaign is that there is no differences between the parties. I believe the differences are huge. And today I want to set out not just some of the reasons why I care so much that we should keep Britain moving forward with a majority Labour government, and why we should fear so much for Britain if we go back to a Conservative government. And I want to do so in the context of fairness. I want to show that our policies are rooted in fairness, and that those of our opponents are not just wrong, but wrong because they are unfair. How many of you sometimes hear what's happening in the world, whether poverty at home, environmental degradation and hunger abroad, and then contrast the excesses of some, like the bankers, against the misery of others, and exclaim, it's just not fair. Now, all parents are used to hearing their children say, it's just not fair. And you know, I think the cry for fairness is not just a whinge, it's something deep in our DNA. And we are as a people, we are as a country, and what our moral sense is defined by what we mean by fairness. And all the policies I want to put forward for the future flow from that belief in fairness. It's what we call a future fair for all. We chose it as our theme for this election because it speaks to who we are as a party, and I believe it speaks to the decent instincts of who we are as a people. And so today I want to talk to you about the different future on offer with Labour, about the three big questions about our future that are relevant to the kind of fairer Britain we are going to have at the end of this century. The first is, as Ed Miliband has just talked about, our bold global campaign to address one of the greatest unfairnesses, climate change, the dominant issue humanity has to face together this century. And today we are launching Labour's Green Manifesto, including new commitments to fight this year for a worldwide climate change agreement, to make sure that more than 100 countries will not only sign up to national emission targets, but will agree a framework within which we can all move forward together, to ensure that some of the poorest countries have the financial help they need to deal with climate change migrants and climate change refugees and evacuees, to have the money to legislate for a statutory code of consumer rights, to create 5,000 low-carbon apprentices and a low-carbon economic area in every region, and to show our commitment to fairness, to help those on low incomes with their energy bills, And I can say today, as Ed has been saying today, that to ensure fairness to the elderly of our country, we will offer for all pensioners over 75 on the pension credit, in addition to the winter allowance they receive, an extra cut of £100 off their energy bills. Now that's fairness in action, and that's fairness we need to see. And the second fairness that I want to see is about fairness in a new politics. That doesn't only inspire you, a politics that doesn't just inspire you with big causes like making poverty history, or beating cancer in this generation, or making the banks, as Wes has done, serve the public and not themselves. But I want a politics that also gives you the chance to get more involved in changing Britain. So we're proposing at this election a referendum on a new type of House of Commons, a new type of electoral system for it, a new type of House of Lords, a new kind of accountable system of electing members of the House of Lords without hereditary peers, new petitions that you can put to the House of Commons, and the right of recall for your MP if he misbehaves and the Commons does nothing about it. And we're also proposing that we have a vote on there being votes at 16 for young people. And if And let's be honest, the Conservatives are not with us on this agenda of change. If they really were the party of change, they'd have changed the policy and said they would abolish hereditary peers in the House of Lords, something that has lasted for centuries but in no democratic country could ever be justifiable. And if they really changed, they'd have changed the policy on fox hunting and accepted the ban on fox hunting instead of trying to repeal it in the interests of few of their friends. If the Conservative Party can't change on these things, they can't change for the people of Britain. Now, the third issue of fairness that I want to raise today is fairness to young people in education and employment. And I'm incredibly proud that we now have a record number of students, and that for the first time, the majority of women, the majority going to university are women. And even in the recent budget, despite the difficulties we had, we still prioritise creating extra university places, 20,000 more, and the student financing to go with them. That's because we don't believe in limited room at the top, but that all young people have something to offer if given the right support to do so. And I'm sure you know about the Young People's Guarantee. We are already offering, but I think if we stay on the road to recovery, we can increase the Young People's Guarantee and create 1 million new skilled jobs in this country and give all of you not only the chance to get by in life, but the chance to get on. So what we are trying to do is to prevent youth unemployment rising in this country and make sure every young people has the chance of a job. But what did we read in the newspapers this morning? And I feel I should bring it to your attention. That the newspapers have got hold of a secret policy memo of the Conservative Party that reveals they will end Labour's guarantee of free nursery places and allow nurseries to charge parents of 3- and 4-year-olds millions of pounds in supplementary fees. Just think about that. Top-up fees now for the under-5s. The very reason we created Sure Start, the very reason we backed free nursery places, the very reason we have fought so hard to let hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty is because it is unfair for a child's birth to be its destiny, unfair that the wealth of your parents should determine the end of your story, unfair that only some of the people can have some of the chance to realise some of the potential. We believe that everyone should have all of the chance to realise all of their potential. And I say we should apply to every policy at this election a fairness test. Is it right? Will it work? Above all, is it fair? So let me set 5 fairness tests that go to the heart of our modern welfare society. And they test whether the Conservative policies can begin to match the fairness we offer. Policies where I believe we can show that the Tories are hurting not just modest income families, but middle income families in Britain. Policies where they are now being revealed to be intent on kicking away so many of the ladders of opportunity for thousands of young people for social mobility. For once you go behind the gloss and the posters and the PR and the style and the presentation, you find that policy by policy, detail by detail, the Tories are planning an assault on all the pillars of the welfare state. Our commitments to education, our commitments to employment opportunity, our commitments to tackling poverty, our commitments to decent life chances for your children. Meeting the first fairness test is ensuring that nursery school children should receive their education free of charge without top-up fees. We're just raising the number of hours that a child can be at nursery school to 15 hours a week, because getting your first chance to learn at nursery school is key to the development of your talents for the future. But the Tories will not match our commitment to raise the real terms budgets for nursery schools. They've already made clear they will not match the cash for Sure Start children's centres for the under fives that we've made available for 3,500 children's centres around our country. And now, worse than that, this morning they oppose and propose now top-up fees for children, which would create a two-tier and divided system for 3- and 4-year-olds in our country. They have walked away from nursery schools with what the head of the daycare industry calls an attack on free entitlement. But do you know what makes me angriest? It's that they're mounting this attack on children's rights, not just nursery schools, but Sure Start centres, at exactly the same time as they're proposing a massive tax cut to the 3,000 richest families worth £200,000 each across the country. I say in the year 2010 to give the richest estates money while demanding money from parents for their nursery schooling is simply not fair. So fairness means decent education for all nursery-age children and not 200,000 tax cuts for a wealthy few. The second fairness test I apply is on child tax credits. We asked the Tories to ensure, as we would, that every child and every parent entitled to continue to receive the child tax credits that are worth tens of pounds a week to many families on top of child benefit, and often more that they receive for child care tax credits for middle-class families, would still be available. But when we press them to continue child tax credits for middle-class families, they have walked by on the other side. They have failed the fairness test again. They are prepared to see thousands of families lose child tax credits while they are prepared to see the richest few given £200,000 each. £1.5 billion would be given to the richest estates in the country, while middle-class families would permanently lose their tax credits on which they depend. Fairness today surely means giving children the tax credits they need and not £200,000 inheritance tax cuts for the very few. Now, the third fairness test is child trust funds. Remember what we've done. We've made a child trust fund available for every child in this country. And a payment into a child trust fund is made as a child is born, £250, an essential element of building up the savings culture among the younger generation. And why have we done this? Because we want not just a few of the sons and daughters of wealthy families to have private trust funds, but we want to give everyone the chance as a child to build up a trust fund for themselves. Now, the Tories have announced they would take them away from families on incomes of £16,000 or more. And the Liberals have announced that they would take them away altogether. I say it's not fair to cut child trust funds that should be available for all children at the same time that you're cutting inheritance tax for the richest few. Even when young people need to build up savings of their own, they would rather add to the savings, that's the Tories, would rather add to the savings of the richest families in this country by a cut in inheritance tax. Now, the next test of fairness is school budgets themselves. And we're at a great academy here that has made so much of a difference. We asked the Conservatives to join us in maintaining school budgets, so that in future years families could rely on improving schools for their children. We wanted to make sure that every child who needed the chance of personal tuition should be able to get it. And we wanted to make sure that every child in secondary schools could have a director of studies that will follow them through, right through the course of their education and give them the advice that is needed. But the Conservatives have said they will not support rising budgets for our schools. They have voted against the free tuition we wish to give to our primary school pupils. Now, I know that some can afford to pay privately for tuition, but it is right in my view that we make available for those who need tuition all the help that we can. When we asked the Tories to support our children by funding our schools, they walked by on the other side. And again, I have to say, they prefer the inheritance tax cuts for a very few to guaranteeing investment in the rising education of the many. I believe it's not fair, and I believe that people will see it's not fair. You know, and the fifth thing, which is a fairness test, we asked the Tories to support education to 18, so that people can stay on in education part-time or full-time in college or through their work, getting part-time education. And we wanted to guarantee also that every school leaver will have an opportunity, and even if unemployed, will have the chance of a job with a future jobs fund that we have now created. And we are able to give a guarantee to every young person who's been unemployed for 6 months or more that they will get a job, or they get training, or they will get work experience. Now, I do not know why the Conservatives have refused to support the Future Jobs Fund. The Future Jobs Fund is the best guarantee of avoiding a return to the desperate situation of the 1980s and the 1990s, when too many young people unemployed became part of a lost and wasted generation. But when we asked the Conservatives to support our measures to 18 and for the Future Jobs Fund, they walked away on the other side. And let me say the importance of this. Better early learning, taken together with more and better nursery education, better help with tuition at school, better help and advice and support to stay on at school, and a job that will give you qualifications and support once you've left school, not only help families today, but these are the main routes for social mobility in our country. By bringing them together, we double the chances of someone from a low-income background getting a middle-income and a middle-class job in the future. So what the Conservatives are doing by their unfairness is pulling away the ladders of social mobility in our country. They are pulling away the opportunities that should be available for people to advance in our country into middle-class jobs. Tax credits cuts for thousands of middle-class families. Child trust removed for most families in the country. School budget cuts because they won't match our pledges on schools. Tuition ruled out in the schools for young people who do need one-to-one tuition and can't afford to pay. Children's centres cut. And now we find that nursery education would also be a casualty of the Tory years. You see, day by day, the full extent of Tory cuts is being revealed. And all the same time as promising an inheritance tax cut for the wealthiest. Their motto is not God helps those who help themselves. Their motto is God helps those whom he has already helped. And I say that is morally wrong. It's wrong. And I think even some Conservatives know it's wrong. So I say this election choice is becoming clearer. Some want to say it's between substance and style. But I say it's between fairness and unfairness. It's between justice and injustice. It's between doing what's right for our country and doing what's wrong. Now, let me just give one final instance. What did we hear from Mr. Cameron on Friday? That they've already marked out the regions to be hit first and hardest by Conservative cuts. Northern Ireland was singled out, and then the northeast of England was singled out. Both singled out as first places for the axe to fall They have Sunderland in their sights. They have Hartlepool, Redcar, Durham. Then it will be Newcastle, Middlesbrough, Morpeth. And what begins with the towns and cities of the northeast will not end there, but will set the blueprint for their attacks on jobs and investments, not just in the northeast, but in the northwest, in the Midlands, in Yorkshire and the Humber, coming towards London too. But it doesn't need to be like that. Britain deserves better. And Britain will get better if we can persuade enough people to vote for fairness on May the 6th. You know, when I was at school with my brother, I was so determined to campaign for justice that we ran an organization to help raise money for the Freedom from Hunger campaign. And when I was at university, I was so determined that low-paid workers in the university should be properly paid that we ran a campaign that was successful to get the university cleaners paid a decent minimum wage. And when I was at university also, South Africa and apartheid was the issue, and we campaigned successfully to disinvest the shares that our university had in South African mining companies. So I was an idealist then, and I'm an idealist now. I believe politics can change the world, and that our Labour Party is the greatest force for fairness our country has ever seen. Because our country has been moving forward these last few years. The cancer guarantee, the fox hunting ban, smoke-free public places, devolution, neighbourhood policing, the minimum wage, the social chapter, the winter fuel allowance, Sure Start, the New Deal for young people, free nursery places, free museum entry, the shortest waiting time since records began, civil partnerships, maternity pay, paternity leave, freedom of information, peace in Northern Ireland, the Climate Change Act, the Cluster Bombs Act, reform of the House of Lords, the Disability Discrimination Act, record NHS investment. And these are just a few of the changes we've made. You know, we've come so far in our short lives. Now it's up to you to ensure the country goes forward and not backwards. So if you want a fairer Britain, you have to vote for it. And you have to vote Labour. If you want to be sure the recovery will happen, you have to vote for us and vote Labour. If you want to protect jobs and public services, our policing, our schools and our hospitals, you have to vote for it and vote Labour. If you want to stop the immoral, unfair, unjust, un-British inheritance tax cut for the richest people in our country, you have to vote for it and you have to vote Labour. If you want to stop the cuts to the northeast, the northwest, and then to every region of Britain and nation in our land, you have to vote to stop them, and that means voting Labour. If you believe in fairness, you need to fight for it, because a fairer future never happens by chance. So get out there and fight for Labour's cancer guarantee. Fight for our Sure Start guarantee. Fight for the tax credits for working families. Fight for the child trust funds for young people. Get out there and fight to protect investment in our NHS and in our schools and in our neighbourhood policing. Get out there and fight for 1 million new skilled jobs, for universal broadband, for high-speed rail. Get out and fight for a national care service and to beat cancer in this generation. Get out and fight and fight and fight again. Not for our party's future, but fight for our country's future. It's when you see the Tory proposals that you realise fairness is in our DNA. It's in the British people's DNA. Fairness is at the core of the British people's DNA. And we are fighting an election on the recovery and not putting that at risk. We're fighting an election on building Britain's economy for the future and not putting that at risk. We're fighting an election on defending our schools, hospital and police and not putting that at risk. We are fighting an election for the British people. Let's fight it and let's win it. Thank you very much.